So today my talk is about one of the components you don't really know. It's the serializer component. So I will introduce the serializer component, and then I will talk about the JMS serializer bundle, which provides extra features on top of the serializer components. So my name is Hugo. I'm 25. I work at SymfonyLive France, and I'm the head of training department. So this is for my biography. And so, first of all, I will introduce the serializer component and serialization process. So what serialization is? So according to Wikipedia, serialization is the process of converting an object, so for example a PHP object, to a different state. So for example an XML output or JSON output or YAML output, and then being able to resurrect this object from this XML representation or YAML representation or whatever. So in Symfony we have the serializer component, which is a standard component. You can use it with Symfony or outside Symfony, it's up to you. So this object, the serializer, has two main jobs. So first of all, serializing an object and deserializing the object. So how it works, internally, we have this main serializer object, and it's built with normalizers. So the normalizers are objects that convert your PHP object into associative arrays. So when you try to serialize a PHP object, the serializer will first convert your PHP object to an array. And then this array is encoded to a specific output, to a representation. So it can be an XML encoding, a JSON encoding, a YAML encoding. So we are using encoders object to convert this PHP array to an output. And in the other way, if you want to unserialize your PHP, your representation, and to resurrect the PHP object, we have decoders, which converts your representation to a PHP array. And then we have denormalizers to convert an associative array to the PHP object. So this is how the serializer component works internally. So we have a serializer interface. So basically you just have to know that the serializer object has two methods, serialize and deserialize. So serialize takes your data, so your PHP object or an array. It can be also an array. You can pass an array of data, and you pass the format in which you want to convert these data. And you will get a string in return, which is your XML output or JSON output or whatever. And the deserialize method takes the string you want to deserialize, so it can be an XML string, JSON string or whatever. The type, so you have to specify which kind of which kind of representation you are providing to this deserialize method, so XML or JSON. No, the type. This is the type of the. Sorry, this is the type of the object you want to get in the end. So this is the class name, the fully qualified namespace of the class, and finally the format, the original format of the representation. So, for example, you have the XML string, the class, the fully qualified namespace of the class of the PHP object you want to resurrect, and the XML value to tell it's an XML string. Then we have the normalizer interface. So, as I said, the normalizer is responsible for normalizing your PHP object to an array. So you pass an object and you specify the format in which you want to normalize. And we have this method supports normalization, which tells if this normalizer supports a specific set of normalizers. And we have the denormalizer interface, which does the opposite process. So we have the denormalize method, which takes the data you want to restore and the fully qualified namespace of the class you want to instantiate. And we have encoders and decoders. So we have an encoder interface. So remember that the encoder converts a PHP array into a specific output format. So the encode method takes your data, your PHP array, and the format in which you want to encode the data. And we have finally the decoder interface, which does the opposite process. So we have the decode method, which takes the XML or JSON or YAML representation of your data and the formats. And it must return an array, or in general it will return an array. So if you want to use this serializer object, this serializer component, you have to first instantiate the normalizers. You have to define the set of normalizers, and by default the component provides a getSet method normalizer, which means when you will pass a PHP object to the serializer, it will use the getter and setter method to read and write your PHP object. So using the reflection API, it will find all getter methods in your PHP object, and it will call the getter method to create the representation of your PHP object. And when you will recreate the PHP object, when you will resurrect the PHP object, it will call the setter method to populate your PHP object. Then you have to specify the list of encoders. So by default, it supports the JSON encoder and the XML encoder. And then you create your serializer objects. So you just pass the list of normalizers and encoders. So these two set of objects both implement. So this one implements both normalizer interface and denormalizer interface, and these ones implement both encoder interface and decoder interface. So if you want to serialize your object, you just have to call the serialize method on your serializer object, and then you just specify the object you want to serialize and the output format you want. So basically you will have this kind of output. I have a booking object which contains a reference, an arrival value, and a designation. And I get this response. So as these two properties were not set in my PHP object, we just have an empty tag. You can also ignore some attributes from serialization, because by default the serializer component reads all your getter methods. It calls all your getter methods, but sometimes you don't want to expose your whole object. So you can add this method on the normalizer, so set ignored attributes, and you just pass a list of attributes, a list of properties you want to ignore. So I want to ignore the ID and customer properties of my booking object. So when I will serialize my object, I will not have this ID and customer tags. And you can unserialize your objects. So there is my XML response or my JSON response. And then I call the decode method on my serializer, and I pass the XML, my XML string, and I will use the denormalize method to get the booking object. So this is my array. So I'm converting my XML representation to an array, and then I will denormalize the array to get my booking object back. So I just have to pass the class I want to instantiate. So this works for very basic purposes. You just pass a simple object, and you can you can convert it to XML or JSON or whatever, and get it back in your PHP as a PHP object. But if you have dependencies, it works if you have the getter method for your dependencies. If you don't have the getter for your dependencies of your object won't be converted. And the components, these other components, may have issues if you have circular references. If you have an object you want to serialize, which has dependencies, and when the dependencies also have a reference to the object you are serializing, you will have an infinite loop, unfortunately. So it works for very basic purposes by default. So if you want to extend the serializer, if you want to create, for example, a decoder or a normalizer, let's say you want to add supports for YAML, because by default it just supports XML and JSON. So if you want to support YAML, this is just a very naive implementation. You have to create a YAML encoder object, a YAML encoder class, which implements encoder interface. And I will use the YAML component to encode my data array to a YAML output. So if I provide a YAML, if I serialize a PHP object to YAML, I will get this output for my booking object. And I can also implement a YAML decoder if I want to revert the YAML string to a PHP object. So I can do that in the same class. I just have to implement the decoder interface, which forces me to have the decode method. And with the YAML component, I will pass the YAML string to convert the YAML string to a PHP array. So if I come with some YAML string, I will denormalize this YAML string or this PHP array, and I will ask to have an Acme booking bundle booking object. So this is how works this serializer component by default in Symfony. As far as I know, there is no serializer service by default in Symfony, so you have to implement it by yourself. But it's very limited by default. So to improve the experience, the serialization experience, Johannes has written the JMS serializer bundle, which provides lots of features on top of serialization. So I will introduce some of them. So you can configure your serializing process with annotations, XML or YAML. You can specify which properties you want to expose or you want to hide. You can specify, for example, a version. If you are providing a REST API and you have versioning in your API, you can specify which data you want to expose for a specific version. So this is quite complete. You have lots of built-in features, and it supports the normalization of very complex graphs. So this bundle you can install with Composer. Provides a serializer service in Symfony. So from the container you can get a serializer service, and with this serializer service you can serialize any PHP object to JSON, XML or YAML by default. So it supports YAML by default. And you can deserialize a string to your PHP objects. Another good part is twig helpers. So it provides built-in twig helpers to encode, to serialize your objects from your twig views. So you can apply the serialize filter on your PHP, on your variable, on your twig variable. So by default, this serialize helper encodes in JSON. You will have a JSON output, but you can specify the output format as a parameter of this serialize filter. So as I said, you can configure your serialization process using YAML. So you have lots of settings you can change. So this is just a bunch of them. So if you want to ask the serializer to serialize a PHP, a specific type of PHP object, so in your bundle, let's say Acme booking bundle, you have to create in resources config directory, you create a serializer subdirectory in which you specify your YAML file, so for example booking.yaml, and then in this file I will say that my this class Acme booking bundle booking, I want to exclude by default all properties of my object. So I don't want to serialize the properties of my object. I want to hide my properties, but I will expose some of them. So you have the choice to expose everything or to hide and just expose some of your properties. You can specify, for example, the XML root name. So if you convert your object to an XML representation, you can set the root node tag name. By default, if I remember, it's results, but you can change to booking, for example. You can set how your properties are serialized. By default, you just use the reflection API, and it reads your properties with the reflection to get the values. But you can ask the serializer to use public methods or getter methods to read your objects. Okay. For example, you can define how your properties in your object are serialized. So I want to expose my reference and amount properties, and you can specify the type of these properties that when you will deserialize your object or deserialize your string, your XML string or YAML string or JSON string, you will get back the corresponding type in your object. You can use XML configuration also. So instead of using YAML, you will create, for example, a booking.xml file, and you have the same settings you can configure from an XML syntax. So you can you have the same configuration. I want to serialize the reference property, and I want to expose this reference property, and this property is a string. So if I unserialize my objects, I want a string in the reference property. But the best for me is annotation configuration. It's easier to use. You will see that you have plenty of annotations to configure your serialization process. So you have a set of annotations located in JMS serializer bundle annotation namespace. So I'm importing this namespace, and then I will specify this annotation on the class or on the properties. So let's see a bunch of them. Let's say you want to customize the XML root node in the output. So you can simply use @serialize\XML root annotation on top of your class, and you specify the root node when you will convert your PHP object to an XML output. So the root node will be booking instead of the generic name, which is results. So we have a booking root node and then the encoded properties. As you can see, by default, the serializer creates tags for each of your properties, but sometimes you want to have attributes. You would like to have XML attributes. So you can ask the serializer to gives you attributes on your root node tags. So I want this booking root node tag, but I want the reference property to be an XML attribute of this root node tag instead of a tag. So when I will serialize my object, I will get the reference property has an XML attribute of this booking root node tag. Which is this one? Okay. So you can also serialize a dependency. So let's say we have a price object, a price dependency. So this is a price object, as you can see, advar price, and I want to serialize this price object. So in my price class, there is this property, so an amount, a VAT value, and a currency. So I want the price to be a single tag, and I want to have a price tag with two attributes, VAT and currency, and the value for this tag will be the amount. So with this XML value annotation, I will say I want to have a price tag with two attributes, and the value of this tag will be amount. So in my booking object, I'm setting the price object, and I will serialize my object to an XML output. So as you can see, the price contains two properties, VAT and currency, and the value, the node value is the amount. So you can completely customize the serialization. By default, it takes all your properties, it serializes all your properties, but sometimes you don't want to serialize everything, you just want to expose some part of your objects. So you can choose how you want to expose data when serializing your object. So on top of the class, you can use the exclusion policy annotation, which takes two values. You have all, or you have the none, if I remember. So all means I want to serialize everything, so this is the default behavior. No, I want to exclude everything, I'm sorry. So I want to exclude all properties, and then you will specifically tell which property you want to expose in your outputs using the add serialize expose annotation. You can also do that in YAML or XML, of course. So I don't want to expose the other properties, so when I serialize my booking object to XML or to JSON or YAML, I will just output the reference property. Or you can do the contrary. You can exclude nothing, so you don't want to exclude your properties, but you will then exclude just some of the properties. So by default, it exposes everything, but you can say explicitly, I don't want to expose this property. Okay, so using add serialize exclude allows you to just exclude one of your properties of your objects. So what was it? It was price. So as you can see, the price doesn't appear in my XML outputs. I think this one is one of the most interesting features of this serializer component. It allows you to specify which properties you want to serialize depending on the version. If you have an API, you want to provide a REST API, and you support versioning. So depending on the version, you will expose more or less data in the outputs. So imagine in my booking class, I'm setting the loyalty number of the user who made this booking, and until version since version 1.8.4 of my application, we have this loyalty number property, and I also want to serialize this property with this name. So instead of having a loyalty number tag, I want to have a loyalty tag. So you can change the name of the tag you will have for this property. So since 1.8.4, I will have this loyalty number. And you can use also until, which means before we added another property, which was membership number. So it's valid until 1.8.3. And I also want to serialize this value with this loyalty tag. So when you will serialize your booking objects, let's say I'm setting these two values, these two properties, but in the serializer, I'm setting the version, my current version of my API. So version is 1.8.2. So it displays this loyalty tag, which is this membership number. This is the previous property. And if the version is now greater than 1.8.4, if I remember, it takes the new loyalty number. Okay, so we have a loyalty tag with the other value. So the best, imagine if you have a REST API, so you don't want to set the version every time in your controllers. Okay, every time you want to set to display you want to serialize your object with a specific version. You would like to detect the version and format automatically. So Matthias Novak, I don't know if you know him, but Matthias Novak is one of the contributors in the community, and he wrote a blog post on his blog, and he explained how to create an API version listener. So you can listen to the kernel.request event if you want to detect the version the client wants. Okay, so the client will send an accept header in the request, and in the request in your accept header you have something like application/vnd.something dash the version plus the format. So for example, application/vnd.html-v1.3 plus XML. So you can create an API listener object, an API listener service. You will inject your serializer in this listener, and then you will try to get the version and the format the client wants from the request. And then I will set in the request, I will set the request format, so XML or JSON, and I will set the version in my serializer, so that in my controllers, I don't have to take care about the output format. It will be automatically set in the request, and the serializer will automatically serialize my object with this version the client requests. Okay. Sometimes you want to expose several views of your object because you have different contexts in your API, and depending on the context, you want more or less data in your output. So sometimes you want 3 data, sometimes you want 2 because you have, let's say, permissions, and depending on the permission of the user, you don't want to output some data. So you can group, like validation groups, you can group the data you want to serialize using the groups annotation. So I want a list group if I want to serialize this a list of booking objects, for example, and I can also have a detail group because I want the reference to be only in both list and details context. But the designation and the designation will only be displayed in the detail group. Okay, so you can tell the serializer to just pick some of your properties to serialize depending on the context. So when you serialize your objects, you can specify the setGroups methods. You call the setGroup method on your serializer object, and you list the groups for which you want to serialize your data. And in this case, I want to serialize my object for the details group in XML or JSON or whatever. So we don't have the ID because the ID is only for the list, but we have the reference because the reference is in both details and list groups. And we have the designation, which is in the details group. So as I said, by default, the serializer uses the reflection API to read your properties. So it directly accesses your properties and serializes your properties. But sometimes you would like to force the serializer to call a getter method or a setter method to read the object or populate the object when unserializing your objects. So using the access type annotation, you can specify with the public methods option, you are telling the serializer to use the getter method and the setter method to access your arrival property. You can also use this access type annotation on top of the class if you want to globally tell the serializer to call all getters and setters on your PHP objects. So let's say when when you serialize your arrival property, which is a datetime object, you want to serialize your datetime object with a specific format. So I will ask the serializer to call this getArrival method to format my arrival date with this format, so month/day/year. So as you can see, my arrival object contains the new format because it called the getArrival method. But you can also specify which you can specify another method to call. Instead of the getter method, you can change the getter and the setter methods to call using the accessor configuration annotation. So you have, for example, this designation property which contains a long designation, and you want to output just a short designation. You want to truncate, for example, the designation. So when serializing the designation, you will ask the serializer to call the getShortDesignation method, and you can also specify the setter method to call if you unserialize your objects. The order can also be defined in your serialization process. By default, it serializes your properties from top to bottom. So if you order your, for example, if you have ID, reference, and designation, they will be serialized in this order. But if you want another order, you can use the access order configuration annotation to change the serialization order. So it supports the alphabetical order, so using alphabetical, or you can use a custom order. So I want to serialize the reference first, and then arrival, and then departure properties. So we have the reference, arrival, departure, and then we have the other properties, because it also takes the other properties in the order they appear in the class. So you can also specify the typing when you unserialize your objects. So it supports lots of types. You can use, you can type a string. You can type, for example, datetime. So you want when you unserialize, when you resurrect the object from an XML or JSON or YAML string, you want to get back a datetime object in your arrival property. So you can type datetime, and the component, the serializer component, will automatically convert a date string to a datetime object. But you can also resurrect a dependency using this type option. So you can specify the type of this price property, and you say, I want to get back a price object in my price property. And it also works with collection. You can type with array and the type of object you have in your collection. So if you want to get back a list of rooms, for example, you can type array and the type of object in this collection. So my last part is about Doctrine. So this is some questions I had in San Francisco when doing this talk. So you can serialize the Doctrine object. It works. So let's say I want to get my Doctrine object, so my booking Doctrine object, and I want to serialize it to XML. So my booking object has dependencies. It has a one-to-many relationship with a customer entity, and it has a many-to-many relationship with rooms. So a booking, when you book, you can book rooms, so you have one or more rooms, and you have a customer who does the booking. So by default, the JMS serializer bundle supports the complex graph. So if you have dependencies, you have your booking object, which is serialized, and in my booking object, I have some rooms. I book rooms, and this is a customer who booked the room. And if you have circular references, let's say in my customer object, I also have a relation to bookings made by this customer, you won't have any infinite loop because the JMS as a bundle detects that you have a circular references, so it stops at the customer level. It doesn't go down in the booking in the booking property. And it also works with collection. I talk about only serializing objects, but you can serialize a collection or an array of objects. So it works with Doctrine, but also with your PHP objects. Oops. So let's say I want to get my bookings from my Doctrine database, and then I want to serialize this collection of bookings I made. So it will also serialize your list of bookings. So as you can see, we have a result root node and 2 entries. I have 2 bookings in my database, so we have 2 entries. And my booking, my first booking, is serialized with the dependencies, with the rooms and the customer. And it works if you want to also unserialize your Doctrine entity. So if you correctly specified all the type annotations in your Doctrine entity to specify the type of your properties, but also of your relationships. So let's say we have a JSON serialized value. So my booking has properties, and we have the customer, and we have the rooms, a list of rooms. If you tell the JMS as a bundle to recreate a room object collection and to recreate a customer object, when you will deserialize your JSON string, you will want to get a booking object, and the JMS as a bundle will automatically create your booking object plus the customer object and the collection of rooms objects inside your booking objects. Okay? So as you can see, it's much more powerful than the standard component, which by default does almost nothing. So if you want to provide serialization with this tool, you can rely on JMS as a bundle. It's very powerful, and you can do plenty of things with this tool. And I'm out of time. So thank you, and if you have any question. Yep.
Yes, given I have an XML file, and I want to make an object out of it, how would I validate this XML file in this process against a doc type definition or a schema?
I'm sorry. I didn't understand the question.
Well, given customers send me XML files that they filled out with information stuff, and I want to check if this file is still valid.
You can. I think you can first try to deserialize your XML file to get your PHP object, and then using the validator component of Symfony, you can validate the PHP object with the assertions that you can check that the PHP object is valid. So if the PHP object is valid, that means that your XML definition is also valid.
Thanks.
There's one in the front.
You have presented the nicely way to serialize the price at the very first slides, and I've got a question: is it possible to? Is it the same way to unserialize? That you
mean
before?
This was before
with reference and.
It was something. Yes,
oh yeah,
here.
in here. So if you pass the serialize, right, on the slide before, can you get that?
This one?
Yeah. So the unserialized way works the same way, right?
Yes, it will recreate your price object.
So it will, if it will get the same XML, right? It will unserialize to the same object right here.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Okay, there's one behind you and then it's here.
One question that may be not really relevant, but when you showed us some interfaces for the, it was the encoder, I think, when you give the data value that is the array, and you want to transform it to a JSON or whatever, it wasn't strictly typed as array, and the PHP docs said mixed type.
Yeah, you can pass another kind of scalar value, and then it will be converted to an array. Okay. So if you specify an integer, then it will be converted to an array. Thanks. So that's why it's not typed as array by default.
Is there any possibility to generate a document definition, a type definition out of the XML annotation that you have? So when I change the with annotation the definition, then it generates a DDT file automatically for me, so that I can send to customers how they have to provide me data or whatever.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So many questions.
If I get it right, you use public methods, getter and setter, to hydrate data of your object. But if you have a constructor with mandatory parameters, how do you hydrate these objects? Do you resurrect this?
Good question. I think you should not have the constructor with mandatory parameters. I think you should have setters to set the parameters. I'm not sure, but I think it calls the constructor anyway. So I don't think there's a way to specify the constructor arguments when initializing the object. I'm not sure.
Because
so.
in your example, you used you displayed an example with price with 3 parameters, where they optional. And you
can by default set your constructor arguments with default values, but then you have to have setters.
Yeah, but so you used the setters and getters.
But maybe Johannes, if he's in the room, maybe he can confirm.
It doesn't call the constructor.
When you enter, it doesn't call the constructor.
When you serialize, it does not call the constructor.
Okay, so it seems that the constructor is not called when you're unserializing your string. So
okay, that was my question. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Oh, yeah. You showed an example of the date serialization, a getter where you format a date in a specific format, as I would consider it better to extract this presentational logic to somewhere else. Where's the place to put it? Something like a data transformer or something? So not put in the formatting function into your model, but put in it somewhere else so that the serializer can pick it up.
You mean the serializer calling another method from another object?
Yeah, you showed the process of the serialization maybe in the encoding or normalization stage, that you say this date is going to be formatted as year, month, day.
You mean when I talk about the type?
No, the type is clear, but you're specifying a specific format for this date. I think one of the last slides.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, right. I think it's with the date format.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, this one. I wouldn't want to put this code into the model. This is just presentational.
You mean
within the application, I would want to use the date time, and it's a getter for this property. So I would not want to use this getter as inside the application. I just wanted to use the datetime object. So where do I put this logic?
You can.
I think there's a new way to do it. I think Johannes added native support or more native support.
Shall I bring it?
So you can actually now put that in the mapping information.
Maybe you give him.
Should I give you a microphone?
Sure.
You make me running on my birthday.
So I think they added Janus added some more support for datetime, so you can actually put the format in the mapping information. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
Cool. Anyone else?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.